Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Savvy and welcome back to Retro Reviews. We have got a very fun one for you today. We have got Cobra, which is the 1986 film, Stallone. We're sticking with the 80s actions films. We're having too much fun with them at the moment. We did Commando last week, and, before that point, we've done the Karate Kid films, we've done Rocky, and, we're just sticking to what we know at the moment. We're just having fun with these, and this is obviously directed by George P. Cosmatos, starring Sylvester Stallone. And this is one that I've wanted to talk about on the channel probably for years now. Like way back when, I was thinking about I wanted to do a show on the channel where we talk about 80s films specifically. I know this is much broader, retro reviews. We can literally pick anything we want to talk about any given week. But just even like putting the background together, it's like it's finally happening. Today it's finally happening. This is just going to be an open discussion talking about the film. This is one that obviously I love, George, that you watched it for the first time today in preparation for this review. And of course, as always, we invite you to comment along. If you've seen the film, if you want to talk about it with us, share some of your experiences, favorite moments with the film, please do that. And make sure that you stick around till the end of the review as well, where we will be announcing next week's retro review. But before we get into it, just over to you, George, for the socials.
Absolutely, guys. So, as we always say, the best way to find out when we're going to be doing our videos and how last minute it can be is to get us on our social medias, which is Facebook at Cinema Savvy and Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. If you're around at the weekend, me and Tate did a quick review on Outside the Wire, a new Netflix release. Safe to say the film was terrible, and it was a very last minute review, which proves the point of checking out the social media. So if you don't already have us on those, do follow us. We're a bit more active on them than we used to be. But as usual, for you guys watching at home, if you're watching the stream, if you're watching sort of later on, do comment below with us. Comment your thoughts on Cobra, but also Stallone films. Last week we had the Arnie ones. In December we did all the Rocky and Creed films. So we're on a bit of an 80s rampage, I think is a polite way to say it now. And we've got a lot more coming up. But do comment along. And if you want to help us out, then do obviously check out the like button, because that does a big thing, as does the subscribe one. Some say that when you press it, fireworks may emerge at your house, so just do it to find out. That being said, we're going to talk more about Cobra, because as Chris mentioned, this is a film I am extremely new to the point of I saw it today. I was tempted to message Chris after a couple of minutes, say I'm on it. I think I sent you a voice now. I couldn't tell if you knew I was watching it yet, but I get very quiet, so I don't even think Chris knows my thoughts right now. But
No, not right now.
It's like Commando. It wasn't another great experience. It's not a cinema. It's not this big elaborate moment. It's one ticked off the list finally. And that's the beauty of these retro reviews. It's finally getting around to watching some of those films we always say we're going to watch, and we are getting the chance to do so. So Cobra is now off the list.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that this was my week's pick, wasn't it? This one, it was just like we're going to do Cobra this week, and you were like, fine. But it's good that you do like the action films as well, because as we always say, they're just easy watches. This one, even less running time than Commando. I mean, we watched the director's cut of Commando, so that was like 90 minutes. This is like 87 minutes, so this is even shorter. But I've got to talk about the plot now for this thing, and it's always hilarious when we talk about these 80s action movies and we get onto the plot or lack thereof. But this is according to IMDb. A tough-on-crime street cop must protect the only surviving witness to a strange murderous cult with far-reaching plans. That's actually probably doing it more credit in terms of the plot than the film actually does. But before we even start talking about this thing, and you can kind of see it in the background there, this is basically my my review right here. Is just that. Just look at that poster for a second. Just take it in. Just absorb that. That is probably one of my favorite movie posters ever made. Crime is a disease, meet the cure. One of the best taglines I've ever seen. And you pretty much get everything you need to. If you haven't seen this film and you don't know anything about it, even from that plot line that I just gave you, just take a look at that poster, and that just, an image says 1,000 words. Love this poster to death. So we always sort of talk about our first time watching this film. And actually, I do have a story, and it's always stayed in my mind. So obviously was always a big Stallone fan, fairly late to the party with the Rocky films, as I mentioned when we did the retrospective on those. But I've always got time for an 80s action film, whether it be Stallone or Schwarzenegger or whatever. And I went around my best friend's house. Again, he's a big 80s film fan. We tend to, like when we were growing up, we'd watch all these films together. And he says, there's a great Stallone film. You ever watched it called Cobra? I've got it saved on Skybox. I was like, never heard of it. And I don't know how many people have actually heard of it. I think it's quite an underrated one. Even, you go through Stallone's catalogue of films. Everyone knows the Rocky films, knows the Rambo films. They might know a few other ones here and there, but Cobra's always that one that's overlooked. And I'd overlooked it because I never heard of it. And he said, it's about 80 something minutes. We're just going to watch it now. And watch it we did. And I loved it. The soundtrack, just how cheesy it was. And again, like if you've seen any kind of film like this, it doesn't shy away from any tropes, any of the tropes of an 80s action film. It has them all intact, and I had an absolute blast with this thing. Even little moments where there's a scene in this film, not jumping too far ahead, but where he goes back to his apartment and he just takes like a pizza out the fridge or something, I think it is, or like a leftover pizza, and he just cuts it with some scissors and sits eating it. And as soon as it got to that scene, we paused the film and we said we should get pizza while we watch this. So we kept it on pause, ordered in a pizza, and then continued to watch the rest of the film with pizza. That was my first time watching this film. I had a blast with it. It was a really good experience.
Did you cut the pizza with scissors too?
Because we did.
This is something in our household. There was a big argument about a year or two ago where I discovered a relative of mine, a father, cutting pizza with the scissors. And I went ballistic. I get why people might, but I've never seen it ever done except then and watching this film for the first time.
Well, I've only seen it from this film, so that's news to me that there is actually someone out there, your father, in fact, who cuts pizza.
Exactly, one. Let's hope it's just him and the thing is, the thing with these Stallone films, which is great, we always say they're kind of autobiographical. Like I know there's a couple of behind the scenes things which I'll leave for you to talk about, but you know, when we approach the Rocky films, it's like I see this part of Stallone's life. Now I'm thinking, does Sylvester Stallone like cut pizza with the scissors? Because I can't imagine him being the kind of guy that would like allow himself to do it if he didn't. So
this is the question I have: does your dad still do it with in terms of scissors, or is it just that one-off freak occurrence?
It might have been beforehand, but certainly not after. It's not been done.
But yeah, no, that was that you watched it today, I'm presuming, right, on a laptop. Yeah, no, exactly. But you say this is semi-autobiographical. Like this shocked me because I mean I've seen the film a bunch of times, but I've never really sort of paid attention to the main opening credits. This is loosely based, I think, very, very loosely based on a book. It's a book called Fair Game, written by Paula Gosling. I've never read that book, and I think that book was turned into an actual film in the 90s. I think Stallone tried to get co-writing credit for the book, and she just turned him down and said no. So I think it's very, very loosely based on that. But this has a really interesting backstory, and I knew a little bit about it, but I read more about it today, and it's really, really fascinating, actually. So apparently Stallone was signed on to write and star in Beverly Hills Cop, you know, the Eddie Murphy film. And I think, you know, it was all set. He was going to be the lead, and Stallone wanted his creative input in the screenplay as well. So he saw the screenplay that had been written, the more comedic style that we do get with Beverly Hills Cop, and he didn't like it. And he wrote his own version of that script, took out all the jokes, made it more hard-hitting, more violent, and completely action-packed, which is more akin to what Stallone was doing and sort of like his strengths as an actor. And the studio just turned it down flat and said, the amount of action that you've written in this financially, there is no way we are going to give you the budget to make this thing. So he left the project, and then obviously Beverly Hills Cop turned into what it was with Eddie Murphy coming on board. Fantastic film. That's another one that I'd love to talk about maybe at one point on Retro Reviews. And then Stallone sort of took his ideas that he wanted to do for Beverly Hills Cop, this sort of, you know, a cop going against like the criminal underbelly. And he turned it into an original screenplay, which was Cobra. Now, apparently the original length of Cobra was 2 hours, 10 minutes. And it was much more violent, incredibly violent. And I think it got like a sort of, I guess it was like an X rating. I think it's like an NC-17 now, isn't it? The equivalent of today's rating for it. But he got an X rating. So he cut out about 10 minutes or so of extreme violence, got it down to 2 hours. And then this film was opening 1 week, I believe, after Top Gun. And because they wanted to squeeze just that those extra few screenings in a day to make its money back, because they were scared of Top Gun, they cut it down to what we now have as 87 minutes. Apparently there is like a really low quality, similar to Rocky V, I think, like that VHS work print out there somewhere. I've never seen that. I'd love to see it now, but there is a list on Wikipedia from the director's commentary of some of the scenes that were taken out, some of the extreme violent scenes. I never noticed anything in the film, but apparently the continuity of the film, there's certain conversation scenes in the film where if you're an eagle-eyed viewer, you can see some things that don't marry up, some continuity between shots, and that's because they've removed lines of dialogue which referenced some scenes that happened that were taken out. So I'm going to have to go on the hunt for that version of Cobra because I'd love to see it. I'm very happy with the one that we get, and I don't know if it would need all of those violent scenes in there. But yeah, just knowing what the original draft was, it's quite interesting. Maybe that's the Stallone director's cut he should have been working on over lockdown and not Rocky IV.
Yeah, I think that's quite fascinating actually hearing that, because the one thing I noticed the violence is certainly in the early scenes before we start killing people. When these people are getting murdered one by one, the camera will sort of do the Jaws thing where it will cut away from the weapon and whatnot, and you see the bodies lying down, and obviously you see some of the bodies, how bad it looks, but they won't show some of them. I think you get the woman on the bench, which looks terrifying. Now you've said that, it stands out that these would have been psycho, because it's a cult, right? And we all know, not to get into real life too much, obviously what happened to Sharon Tate. Probably the most famous cult sort of victim of all time, except Trump's was. And basically, yeah, you read into it's horrible. And I'm not saying he had that approach, but I could have imagined those scenes being disgusting to watch. And I'm pretty loose when it comes to sort of gore and violence. Like, if you can sit through the Raid films and not squirm, you're good. Same with John Wick 3 with the knife scene. And I can imagine, and this was uncomfortable even with the cutaways. And I think there was a sadistic version out there because, I mean, we'll get into that. But the cult is terrifying. And if you're creating a terrifying cult, you're doing a damn good job of creating one, let's be honest. And I think that was a really big thing that now you've kind of said that, it actually stands out quite a lot, because the great thing about this 80s films is they flow so well. They're short, they're quick, and you could just steam through and carry on. And I think sometimes it felt too soon for what the plot was trying to do, I guess, which is quite interesting, because 1 minute then suddenly they're at a safe house. It's like, what? Okay, that's fine. And then they're not at the safe house. Then they're at another safe house. And it's like, okay, and that's the final battle. And I think that's like, that was one of my criticisms. The pacing felt off, even though it was nice and quick. It just felt a bit too
quick,
drawn out. It felt how drawn out it got felt too quick to be that drawn out. And I think that answers probably one of my biggest issues with the film. But either way, they did to lose probably a quarter of a film.
It's a good chunk to cut out, isn't it? Yeah, like
maybe there'll be a 4-hour TV miniseries now film again coming out on HBO Max. Who knows?
Maybe. I'll talk about the TV actually, because you might not be far off with the whole TV thing. There are rumors apparently, which I wasn't aware of. So hopefully they pay off at some point. But yeah. So what we get essentially is just your run-of-the-mill 80s action film. But I mean, it's Sylvester Stallone. Like, you just see Sylvester Stallone, but he is playing the character of Lieutenant Marion Cobretti. I just love the image of him, though, and it's how they build him up at the beginning. It's one of my favorite bits. It's like, they've got some shit going down, the cops, they can't handle it, and it's just like calling the Cobra, and then it just cuts to, I don't know what kind of car that is. I don't know cars.
It's like the Michael Caine car from Cars 2. That's what I kept thinking.
Yes, yeah, it's like an old muscle car or something. I don't know. It's probably on, I'm looking on Wikipedia, it's probably on there somewhere. I did read that, though, that car actually did belong to Stallone. He had that car, and then they built, he didn't trash the car for the film. Like, they built like 3 stunt vehicles, I think, for it, but that was his actual car. Doesn't surprise me. And it's just that shot where you've got, like, similar to the poster, it's like the red sunset sky, just the silhouette of the car coming over the hill, cut back to the action, cut back, the car's a little bit closer. It's everything. It's the design of his gun with, like, the Cobra on it. It's the toothpick. And apparently, I didn't know this. I can't remember who the director of the film Drive is.
Nick. Oh God, that's horrible. How have I forgotten?
I can't remember.
It's going to really annoy me.
Go on, search it up. Anyway, the director of Drive,
Nicholas Winding Refn.
Thank you. He's a massive fan of this film, and apparently he tried to homage this. I think it was with Ryan Gosling's character has the toothpick in his mouth. I don't know if that's a thing. It's been a while since I've seen Drive. Yeah. Apparently that was in relation to this film, like a little nod to that film.
That's pretty cool.
He's just awesome. I mean, what do you say? Is it really a character? Is it just Stallone? The two just kind of meet in the middle, don't they? After a certain point, you watch enough of these films. But I just think he's really cool. He's probably one of my favorite, coolest sort of like 80s action characters, if you're going to call them a character, from any of these films. It's just everything. It's the shades. It's just the look. It's just perfect, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think what's nice, because obviously this is in the middle of all that Rocky stuff, and again, I've not seen the Rambo films, but we're in, like, we always used to say prime Stallone's probably the best term, and I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't expecting this like 50s muscle car, or I mean, we know the poster's got the glasses and stuff, but you get the opening. The opening is probably actually my favorite scene in the entire film. The opening, like it's not just a scene, is it? It's like it's like a prologue in theory. And it's the build up to him, the nutcase in the shop, and everything about calling him in, as you said, is great. The car, him coming out of it, the way he just walks around the supermarket, has a drink before he throws the can as well.
Oh, the product placement in that scene in this film.
They're all Cool's beer. I think everyone's been buying Cool's beer because of Cobra Kai. You can get this weird American version. It's like a bubble. But yeah, the product placement, again, it sums up that 80s era that they're going to only drink beer or like pop. And it's going to be Coke or Pepsi. Because obviously those two buy each other out the contracts. But I love the opening stuff with him. And I thought that was a fantastic way to set him up. We love these action films, how they build these people. We laughed last week with Commando that Schwarzenegger's got the family life. It's so over the top. It's almost like Lord of the Rings when you've got them all jumping on the bed and stuff. That was basically Schwarzenegger's first scene. But this one's like, here comes Stallone. And this is Stallone. This is what he's like now. And it's him being a badass, doing badass things, saving the day, but being edgy in the way he does it. Now, what I'm going to say, not just the film, probably not just the opening scene, sorry, but more the film. I don't like the one-liners as much as Arnie. There's some great one-liners, but I think Arnie is the unparalleled king of the action one-liners. I don't think anyone can ever compare him. Not to get into the Arnie Stallone debate, but I did watch this and I was tempted to message you say this is no Commando, which is really unfair because I know they're action films. They couldn't be more different in terms of story anyway. But it did go back to that divide. Like, I know I prefer Stallone because of the Rocky films, but I prefer the Arnie action films, and I couldn't. I think it's impossible to watch a Stallone or Arnie film and not think of the other. I think that's the power they have on all of it. It's all connected.
It's really tough, isn't it? And I mean that could be a debate for a separate video. We could sort of look at all the films they've done side by side, which one objectively has the better films or the most in terms of films like this, sort of like your run-of-the-mill 80s action films. I'll agree with that in terms of the one-liners and everything. And I do think that the action's probably, I don't know, there is some pretty cool action though in this film towards the end. Like the car chases are very well filmed, very well choreographed, all of that stuff. There's the bit where he just starts killing like everyone on these motorbikes towards the end, and then it's probably down to the budget of the film. They're sort of like driving through fields because they're away from traffic, and then all of a sudden they're in a steel mill. Of course, they have to be in a steel mill with like smoke and steam coming from pipes. We saw that last week in Commando. That just seems to be like the final battleground for the final boss fight with the main villain. So I don't quite get how the geography works with this place. Maybe there was footage cut where it was actually traveling between places. Who knows? But no, I'll agree with that. And I mean, how this stacks up with other 80s action films, I don't know. I know that I love this film, and would I rather watch this over Commando? That's really tough. I do prefer the soundtrack to this film. This has got a great soundtrack. We'll talk about the music later on, and I do like, I guess, like the aesthetic of this film a bit more, sort of that sort of like really urban, decayed city, criminal underbelly kind of thing. I do like that as a backdrop. I think that works very well for the film over Commando, which really isn't that kind of film. It's just sort of like a rescue him, a daughter film, essentially, with so much killing and violence at the end. It's great. But I mean, this has all the tropes in it of any kind of police procedural thing that you'll see. It's, it's the damsel in distress. You got to save the girl, which is Bridget Nielsen's character. You've got the kind of his best friend / sidekick, and there's this sort of running joke. It never kind of lands as a joke to me, but they keep pushing it. So I guess it's a character trait where his sidekick's just eating like sugary foods like candy and sweets and chocolate, and Stallone just keeps saying like, eat something natural, like try prunes or fish or something. And it's crap dialogue. It's utterly crap, and I will be the first to admit that it's crap dialogue, but I just kind of love it. I don't know why. And then obviously, like, one of the biggest payoffs of the film is the detective, Detective Monty, who's an absolute prick the entire movie. You hate him. He hates Cobra, clash of personalities, and at the end he gets his comeuppance. So it's got all of the things that you need for a film like this. And then obviously the bad guy as well. I don't know which character to talk about really, because there isn't really much to say about Bridget Nielsen, is there? When we're introduced to her, there's that really awkward scene afterward, like especially in hindsight, like #MeToo, but she seems like oddly cool with it. I don't know, it was weird. Exchange.
There's that weird scene. It's the weird extended montage of the modeling shoot.
That's one of my favorite songs in the film, but it is like a music video, isn't it? It's just this is going to take up 5 minutes of screen time.
It's if anyone's ever seen that Iron Man and Partridge series, it's kind of like when he has these visions of him. It's really weird. It's epitome of 80s, but it's kind of when I said to you before, and I was like, this is obviously when Stallone was with Bridget Nielsen, because I can imagine the conversation the producer is we're just going to film her having a photo shoot for 5 minutes straight. And it's going to be like, how many different... However, it's like a full photo shoot. It's not like Spider-Man 3 when it's like you're seeing a minute of a photo shoot. We are seeing the entire photo shoot. And it does end with the really awkward, obviously, if you want to progress your career, you can just sleep with me. And that guy does die straight away. So I guess there's some justice to it, really. But it's very odd. And I know it was that kind of 80s thing, and that stuff would have happened without a shadow of a doubt. Obviously, we all know things like that do happen. But it just stood out. And I know that obviously they want to say that she was a model and stuff. And it was like, we know they're going to go find out. And also, I thought they were looking at where she lived, but they ended up following her to the photo shoot. And granted, they probably did some more digging and stuff, but it just felt weird. And
it's
I don't know why.
Photo shoot as well. Like, we're throwing the word weird around a lot, but it's
like robots. There's robots. Oh, is that meant to be a Rocky IV reference? No.
Well, I said, like, that was one of the things. Like, when I went to the convention, she was there. I said, like, what was like Stallone's fascination with robots? He had the photo shoot in this film in Cobra, and then he's got the robot in Rocky IV. I don't know what's going on. It was weird. And I know that the 80s were a certain time, but it's mad. It's mad. And yeah, she was just. There's only one reason she's in this film, basically. Let's be fair. And apparently there was sort of like a behind the scenes story I did read, which was quite funny, which I told you about before we went live, where I think that Stallone didn't direct this film, but I think, I don't know, it might have been the cinematographer himself, actually, who sort of went on record saying he kind of was directing the majority of the film, like unofficially. He's not credited as the director, but for all intents and purposes, he kind of was. And they were behind schedule. And Stallone was saying to the cinematographer, like, look, get your people working round the clock. We're behind. And then the cinematographer sort of called him out and said, well, the only reason we're behind is because of your fun outings that you're having with Bridget Nielsen. That's why we're behind schedule. So it sounds like there was almost a bit of a bust up on the set for this film. I'd love to know some more behind the scenes stories from this thing, but yeah, it's bizarre. What I think the thing with the film is, in terms of the writing and the ideas, I can see what Stallone was trying to do. He's playing a lot with these ideas of almost the futility of law enforcement, where they can put people away, but they're just going to get let out in a few months' time. And do you take more drastic force? And when you do that, you have all the press at the beginning of the film complaining that they've just gunned someone down in cold blood. They should be rehabilitated. And, he's playing with all these ideas. And even in terms of sort of like creating an environment for like a dark, sinister city, like the criminals and everything, like that conversation we just had there, where you've got these seedy photographers and modeler shoots that are saying, I'll sleep with me and I'll advance your career kind of thing. He's dealing with all these things, but they feel a bit ham-fisted with how they're put across on screen, or how it comes to the screenplay. So I can see the ideas of what he was trying to do, but it needed a bit of tightening up, I think, with the script. Not to hold anything against Stallone, because we've known that he can write and he has written some fantastic films, but I love this film for what it is, because it's not trying to be anything that it isn't. But I get the impression that Stallone was expecting this to be this grandiose crime film, and it didn't quite hit that mark, I don't think, that he maybe intended.
Yeah, it's that kind of, not even producer power, but I think when you've got that 80s Stallone, the guy that created Rocky, wrote Rocky, Rambo, No One Says No to Me, you definitely feel there is that kind of vibe. And that's why you mentioned that cinematography thing is interesting, because the guy had balls. I mean, he obviously stayed on set. He kept his job. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'd have been someone else, he might not have kept his job, or if it had gone down that bad, but maybe there was a bit of a wake up call for Stallone, who knows. But I think when you've got these A-listers in, I mean, you don't get to like it anymore. Even today's A-listers, think of the biggest, quotation mark, biggest actors of the last 20 years. Let's probably say Leonardo DiCaprio is probably the biggest one there's been by a country mile.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he picks his projects wisely, so you can't make a comparison. Number one, maybe a fairer point is Robert Downey Jr. Financially, biggest actor, one of the biggest actors in history, easily probably one of the biggest names anyone in the world can tell you right now is Robert Downey Jr. I can't imagine him on set. I mean, he does do films sporadically. I think that's probably a better word. So he doesn't do that many anymore. But I can't picture him on set kicking off at other people. Now, I can imagine being very strict with how he is on set and how he's approached and what he does in his trailers and whatnot. That's because it's Robert Downey Jr. and, 10, 15 years' time, it might be very different and whatnot. But when you think of these people like the Stallones, that I'm not saying it's right, but you kind of accept that in that mid-'80s period, no one's going to be the person that says no to them because they are bigger than life itself. They kind of, what footballers are and what sports people are modern day are like these 80s actors back then. Like, people idolize them and they still do today. And I think culture's just evolved so much since then. That's why we always have that discussion that we don't have anyone like this anymore in the modern day. And those 80s actors don't get to do as much, or their films on paper probably don't do as well because time has moved on, the industry's moved on and whatnot. And it's always fascinating when you read these stories because we all know this kind of stuff exists. We all know he's been sort of guilty of doing it, but it's also kind of intriguing to read about it more when you've never really seen, when you know stuff but don't know the specifics of stuff. I think that makes it quite fun. But then you read it's like, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But I completely understand why that, you've got to think of the mindset of the individual. The cinematographer tells them you're doing a crap job. It's a reality to a point, but it's probably a shell shock surprise because no one else is going to have the balls to say it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that Stallone was like a bully, but maybe it's like, you land a punch on the bully and then he stops bullying you because he respects you after that. So maybe it was that case. Maybe, like the cinematographer standing up for himself curried favor with Stallone in a way, and then he was accepted on set. I don't know. There's probably loads of stories. And going back to what I said about like the whole writing thing where, maybe this was a different vision. It clearly was in a way, 2 hours, 10 minutes. I mean, I don't know if a film like this needs to be over 2 hours or even 2 hours bang on the dot. Maybe the extra footage does flesh things out a little bit more. I've heard that a lot of the footage as well deals with characters, sort of like secondary characters, side characters, and when it was coming down to the edit, again, I don't know how much input Stallone had with the edit of this film, but it was mostly centered on all of his scenes, and they chose to remove, pretty much every other scene with the side characters. I think there was a bit more insight into the it is the New World Order, isn't it? We established before we hit live that that's a wrestling thing. It is the New World Order. I think it goes into some like the individuals there and sort of like their day jobs and stuff like that. I don't know how much of that is necessary to the film. If there is a work print out there, though, I would love to see it just to see how it differs, if it is a completely different viewing experience for this. But you could tell they were probably, when it came down to the editing of this film, it was like, get it under 90 minutes and let's make it a sort of palatable action film that people are gonna, watch a couple of times and just escape to. And that's all it is for me. There is one other character we need to talk about, though. Brian Thompson, who plays the Night Slasher. He doesn't get a name. He's called the Night Slasher. I think he's a fantastic bad guy in this film. Again, apparently he had a bit of a set to with Stallone on set. I think Stallone was kind of dismissive with him, didn't give a shit about him, didn't give him much advice. I think Brian Thompson as an actor sort of wanted a bit more direction. I think he was saying, what's the character's backstory? It's like the classic trope. What's my motivation, to try and get into character? What has made him so evil? And Stallone, I think, was just like, he's just evil. Just play him as an evil bad guy. And he does that well. Just the way he acts, the way he says his lines, but how he looks as well. He's got such a striking look in this film. I don't want to be horrible to the guy. He has kind of got a face only a mother could love in this film, but he is an imposing guy. He is a scary looking guy, and he plays the part very well, I think. Even his knife as well, like even the knife's really memorable. It's like this, almost like this knuckle duster knife, this custom design. And I just found out, actually, because I was trying to see if I've seen him in anything else. The first role that he ever had was a very, very small role in the first Terminator film. And he played one of the punks who Arnie kills at the beginning. Alongside Bill Paxton, who was also one of the punks. Bill Paxton was in last week's film, Commando. It's all connected. All these 80s action films in some way.
This is what I was going to say. So I'm just quick having a look at Brian Thompson too, and it didn't go too well. So he ended up not in The Expendables, but he wrote, produced, and starred in the parody The Extendables.
Is that like a scary movie type film?
It's a B-movie parody. It doesn't look that good, but it's based on events he witnessed in real life. I'm guessing there'll be some Cobra references, but maybe it says that he was in some of those action films, didn't get on with Stallone, and ended up making this. Maybe they'll be a bit biased, I don't know, but that's kind of intriguing. I'm really intrigued now. That being said, though, I thought as a villain he was great. He was creepy. He was terrifying. I love these little things, even dyeing their hair because they recognize you now. Change his hair color. Okay, now they won't. I like these little things, and like every great villain, they need the villainous goodbye. And this guy was put on a meat hook, and he was sent away into a fire. That is brutal, even for the 80s films. I did think of Terminator 2. I know this did come before it, but when they're in the factory at the end, it's like, Terminator 2 vibes. And it was just that when he got impaled onto the meat hook, and I was reading that apparently one of the scenes that was in this extended version is Stallone digging the meat hook deeper into his body and screams and thought, you did a good enough job at telling us how painful that is. He reacts very well to that. So I thought he was fantastic as a terrifying, creepy cultist leader. I think that's a better way of saying it. He looked like a cultist leader, and he had the physicality to go up against Stallone. I love the little speech where he goes about how he'll get sent to an asylum. Stallone gets the great one line, and then the weird police woman obviously jumps in the way and stops it, and then he kills her. Doesn't even care. He's just shotgun through the back. It's like all great cultists that the people that follow them think that they've always got their back, and history tells them, as of today, that they will never have their back. They're looking after themselves. But I love the little final fight, although he's still, not to be one of them things, not cinema sins, but I don't know why he's still deciding to keep his shotgun when he's trying to fist fight Stallone. Doesn't make sense. I'm sure he regretted that 30 seconds after, but I thought he was great. It felt different that, physically he's there, but not to get a carbon copy of Stallone as a villain. I think it's quite nice. But that's what I kind of said to you. I was surprised by this film, that the fact it was about cults, that it was something different. I was expecting that traditional action villain, all the over-the-top stuff, but no, there was over-the-top things, but it was set in a disturbing, grounded reality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, sort of talking about favorite moments, throwing some out there. The ending fight in the factory is probably one of my favorite moments. And you mentioned the one-liners and everything in the speech. That's probably the most quotable part of the film for me. Certainly the one-liner. This is where the law stops and I start, sucker. That's one of the main ones. Again, probably not as good as Arnie. I'd be interested to know what the one-liners would have been actually in with Arnie. What would the hook one be? Stop hanging around or something. It would be something. It'd be something probably amazing. Something like I can't even think of what it would be. Maybe there's a similar one in an Arnie film that I haven't watched yet. So that's definitely one of my favorite moments. Other favorite moments. It's just, for me, like the whole film just breezes past. Like it's 80 some odd minutes. I love the Angel of the, going to like the music as well. The Angel of the City music video / montage / photo shoot thing. I don't know why, but you just don't get scenes like that in films now. It's just where the movie just, it lets the music speak for itself and the visuals. And that was an 80s thing as well. We especially see that with Rocky IV, where the whole film feels like a music video. And I'm not against that, even, and recently as well, Cobra Kai, certainly in episode 1, that driving montage, which is sort of going back to some of those moments. There's no audio, there's no ambience, it's just the track and visuals, and that's all you get. So I love that. The soundtrack as well. I found something out today as well, which is really fun about the soundtrack. So do you remember back to the Transformers the movie from the 80s, the animated one?
I've seen it. I don't remember that much about it, except I didn't like it as much as the Michael Bay films.
That's fair. There's a song in it called The Touch, which plays in like the main fight between Optimus and Megatron. It's like, you got the touch, you got the power. Yeah. It's like this big triumphant song. That was originally written for this film, apparently. It was going to be used in Cobra. Ended up not being used in Cobra. It was probably just left on the cutting room floor and then was picked up by Transformers. I was trying to play that song alongside this, and I just can't do it. It's so synonymous with me with Transformers now that it's weird for me to even think about that song being attached to any other film. But it's kind of interesting where for loads of these films, even when we did like the Rockies and the Karate Kid films, we'd hear of these songs that were written for the film were passed up for something else, and then that eventually getting reused in something else or being released separately. So that was a fun thing. But it's one of my favorite 80s soundtracks to a film. There are a few songs on the soundtrack that don't appear in the final film. Maybe that's to do with the cut footage, and maybe those songs were originally used in a work print of the film. It's just a solid soundtrack. I go back to a lot of the tracks individually on their own, but other favorite moments, I'm trying to think. I like the bit where he kind of squares up to that guy. He like parks his car, doesn't he, and nudges into his car.
He moves the car.
He like rips his vest down and screws his cigarette up and throws it on the floor. I don't know. Fun little bits like that. I don't know. How about you?
I loved the opening scene at the supermarket. I love that whole sequence. But it's unfair to put a whole sequence up. What else I like? I like the final action scene. The car chase I thought was really well done.
Yes.
Very hard to do good car chases. I think that's really worth saying that a lot of these films have them, but that was a drawn out one. I think it was a well done one. I like the fact it was a different car. It was that sort of 1950 type one. So that was quite fun.
The bit where they're ramping up over the bridges and like airtime. Yeah. I love that bit. And then going into the boat as well, the corkscrew.
I wasn't that keen on the hospital sequence. I know that's one of the big actions. I think it's harder because they've cut so much of the film out. I'm just trying to imagine other scenes that existed. There's probably loads of action scenes that we'll never see or never heard of that they might have kept under wraps. But I think it's probably. I know it's really bad. It's like I hate saying my opening scene's the favorite scene from films, but sometimes they are. And I thought it's just the build up, the reveal, Stallone himself getting his sequence, and I guess that guy was a New World Order, but kind of like the initiation of it because it's just this nutcase that loses the plot, and he mentions about the New World. So maybe that would have been tied in a bit more down the line, but.
I think maybe we'd have got more of an understanding of who they are as well, because we know that they murder people, and we know that they've got just some weird, obscure cult thing, like they're shaking up. Maybe it's like the Joker, right? Like chaos and anarchy and everything, and just go nuts and everything. But all we see from their sort of group meetings is them just standing in like a warehouse somewhere and just sort of like clanging hammers together in the air, which is very strange.
It's really weird. It's hard to sell that at the start of a film because you don't know if it's a joke or not. And then when it does carry on, it does get better, and I appreciate it a little bit more because it was at the start. Is this a musical? Is this a joke? I didn't really know what it was, and then eventually it kind of even was like, okay, now it makes sense. This is the cult. I think maybe that's something that's a bit too extreme to show at the start of the film because it was too far out there, I think, in terms of
it's just stupid. It's just ridiculous. Like, you've got this evil organization. Like, could you imagine Voldemort and the Death Eaters in the Harry Potter films just standing around, just sort of like clanging wands together or something, and they're not actually like saying anything. They're just, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird, but you know what? I with films like this, I don't have to think about it, and that's the luxury of having films like this. You can just throw it on. It's dumb. It's dumb. You know what you're getting in for, and that's precisely what the film delivers to me. Now, in terms of the sequel of this, I can't even call it a franchise, can I? This IP, I guess, of Cobra. There might be life in it. Yeah, I remember years ago, and this was on Stallone's Twitter, and I don't know if he still does, but he used to talk in capital letters. That seems to be like a Stallone thing. And I remember him teasing a picture, and I think it was, I don't know if it was the poster, but it was something from Cobra. And he said, it was like, he did like a vague sort of caption tagline, and then he hashtagged it with Cobra 2 ? And I lost my mind. I think it was like, would you like to see Marion Cobretti return or something in capitals, #Cobra 2 ? And I lost my mind. I thought, it's happening. And that was years ago. I can't even remember when that was now, probably like about 4 or 5 years ago. And there's still no word on a Cobra 2. I did check on Wikipedia. I don't know how accurate this is, but apparently in May 2019 at Cannes Film Festival, Stallone discussed that a remake is in development in the form of a television series. I could see it working as a TV series.
Yeah.
And then apparently by September of that same year, he confirmed the project is moving forward with Robert Rodriguez serving as director/creator. Again, I could see it working with him directing it. And we've seen him work in TV now recently as well, directing an episode of Mandalorian. So nothing's been picked up by the studio at the moment. It hasn't been decided whether it's a film or a TV show. I'd like to see this continue in some vein, but, with a TV thing, Stallone ain't going to do a TV series. It ain't going to happen. So could I see him returning? I mean, he's probably retired off the force now, right? Like, if he was still doing what he's doing, maybe, he's retired, but he has to get back into the game when a new villain arises and crime happens. I don't know. I'd like to see it, but to me, this is just a one and done product of the time. You ain't going to be able to recreate that. And I think if you did anything sort of modern, I think you'd
True Detective.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the closest thing we have to like a cultist TV series villain is True Detective, and I kind of want to see Stallone in True Detective now. Probably wouldn't work, I'm not gonna lie. But
I think that because this was made to be an action film, like an 80s of the time action film, and it was edited eventually to be that way. I think if he was going to do a modern one, it would be very serious, it would be very grounded, which we've seen him kind of do with some of his later remakes, like the last couple of Rambo films, and certainly like the last few Rocky films as well, or Creed, sorry. I think maybe that would be a continuation of maybe his original vision for the film. If we'd have got that 2-hour film and it was more violent, maybe a sequel or something that's more modern and gritty would fit more into that. But as this is, you can't do that at following this film. This film's ridiculous, and I love it because of that. So I don't think it would work. I think certain things would work for a sequel. I think Rambo, well, actually, they should probably stop the Rambo films now. They should have stopped those in the 80s. But, the Rocky films, there's at least a story there. There's a legacy there. There's characters. I don't think it works with every single Stallone property, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's one of those where I think, because it's the timing of that era, I mean, not to be horrible to the 80s stars, when they do these films now, I think when Arnie made his big return, was it the last time of Johnny Knoxville? The audience didn't turn out for it. And I think because it was that pop culture sort of that what they were, this, in this modern day, there's so much about it. The actors were the superheroes. You would go and watch the new Arnie film, the new Stallone film, the new insert action star here. Now you can watch the new Thor film, the new Iron Man film, and they've kind of reversed roles. And that's why it is harder to get that out. I don't think they'd have the interest. I would love to see something, but I think with Stallone, I know he's got this film coming out soon that he's hyping up, as he always does hype them up, about he's a superhero that lives next door to someone, and he's been missing for like 20 years because no one knew he was a superhero, something like that. And I think revisiting Rocky was perfect, that it was needed. And I guess Harrison Ford, he's revisited 3 franchises, Star Wars, Indy, and of course Blade Runner. Mm-hmm. And the audience wasn't there for Blade Runner, as it wasn't there for the first one originally. I don't think it's wise to bring it back. I think they've moved on, and sometimes it's better to leave, especially these 80s classics, is to leave them best untouched. Especially when you think of Cobra, they've not had the remake yet. They've not had the sequels and all the follow-ups. How many of those classic 80s films have ended up getting a sequel, mm-hmm. or have ended up getting rebooted down the line? RoboCop. What's the other Arnie one with Colin Farrell did the remake?
Total Recall, wasn't it?
Total Recall's had one, yeah. And I'm sure there was rumors about Running Man a couple of years ago. So they are entertained. They are IPs that people want to delve into, but leave it locked up. Don't do it. Dredd was remade for the right reasons, absolutely. But it's one of those where I think it's nice to sit back and watch these in a kind of polite time capsule. But I don't think we're ready for a return to it. I don't think it is that the closest thing to this is True Detective, and I'll give me some Matthew McConaughey over a modern day Stallone doing the same thing. So not to sort of be a downer on it, but it is that let the past not die. Just don't bring it back. Just let it be in that 80s action category. Yeah, best way to do it.
No, absolutely. Final thoughts for me. I'd recommend this film if you haven't seen it. If you do like your 80s action films, maybe this is one that you haven't seen. I don't think it's, as a name, is as popular as, say, a Commando, or even, like, as I mentioned, like a Demolition Man, some of other Stallone's films. I thoroughly enjoy this one. It's not Shakespeare. It's not trying to be Oscar winning. In fact, I think it won a lot of Razzies, but then again, what film doesn't win a Razzie? It's just a lot of fun for me. It's one that I come back to occasionally. It's a solid 80-minute watch for me. What can I do tonight? I want to watch an action film. Throw on Cobra, 80 minutes, done. And I was actually looking at the director as well, George P. Cosmatos, because I was curious to see what else he's directed. It wasn't a name that sort of instantly stood out to me. Apparently, he directed Rambo: First Blood Part 2, or just Rambo 2, for the sake of ease of saying the name, and Tombstone, which is meant to be fantastic, Western film. I think I watched that many years ago. Can't remember it, so I'd love to go back to that one. Maybe that could be a future retro review. But we are now teasing. That's not going to be next week's retro review. We do have in mind what we're going to do for next week, and we're about to announce it now. So, George, this was one of your picks, so I'll let you announce it for us.
Yeah, this is another one that I have not had the chance to see. That's 3 in a row for January. We're going to be watching Tango and Cash. I don't have a little scroll bar. So Tango and Cash is coming. It's a film I've heard a lot of good things about of many people across many years. And when we had the panel of these 80s films, I think, was this the first one I mentioned to you?
Yeah.
I kind of really want to watch Tango and Cash. And I kind of was able to edit the month into 3 films I've not seen. So that's a kind of polite blessing on my end. But I'm very excited to see that because I like Kurt Russell and I've not seen many Kurt Russell films. I think I saw the famous escape from whichever one it was meant to be on a flight to America, and I was absolutely shattered. I didn't remember liking it because I was tired. I had no clue what was going on. I think I've seen Sky High. I've seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't think I've seen many of the Kurt Russell films other than them 4 or 5. And
it's fantastic. Big Trouble in Little China, The Thing. He was mostly in the John Carpenter films, really. I think that's sort of like where I've seen the bulk of his filmography. I think he was in the one I just mentioned. Oh God, what did I just say? The Western film. Tombstone, was it? I think he was in Tombstone. So Tango and Cash, I have watched it. It's been many years, and honestly, I can't remember it. So for all intents and purposes, it's going to be like a first time watch for me as well. So I've always got time for Kurt Russell, and especially more Stallone. We're just loving these films right now. We're just having fun with it. So we will be back 8 p.m. next Tuesday for Tango and Cash review. That'll be a lot of fun. And indeed, this week, Fridays, we're sort of like averaging about 2 videos a week. We'll be back this Friday with WandaVision, which will be episode 3. We'll have our discussion on that Friday, 8 p.m. GMT. We had a really good discussion on the first 2 episodes last time, our speculation tying into the MCU. So if you're a Marvel fan, please do check that out as well. And of course, we finished our conversation now on Cobra, but now it's over to you guys to keep the conversation going as well. Let us know what your thoughts are on Cobra, and indeed some of your favorite Sylvester Stallone films. He's got a lot of great ones, especially from the 80s, so please feel free to share them too. This has been a lot of fun tonight. So until the next video, guys, we'll see you on the next one.